Hi friends, welcome you all. Today we will discuss on second part of learning and knowledge. Okay? As life is so complicated, it seems to me that one must approach it with great simplicity. What is the definition of creativity? Creativity is the art of turning new and imaginative ideas into reality. Creativity is characterized by the ability to perceive the world in new ways, to find hidden patterns, to make connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena, and to generate solutions. Man is the most creative animal. He has to create. There is no other way. In lower stage he has to procreate, or his sexuality should be satisfied. In higher stage his creativity goes into poetry, music, science, new innovation, invention, and so on and so forth. Life is a vast complex of struggle, of misery, of passing joy, and perhaps for some the pleasurable continuity of a satisfaction they have known. Confronted with this extraordinarily intricate process that we call existence, surely we must approach it very simply, because it is the simple mind that really understands the problem, not the sophisticated mind, not the mind that is burdened with knowledge. If we want to understand something very complex, we must approach it very simply. And therein lies our difficulty. Because we always approach our problems with assertions, with assumptions or conclusions, and so we are never free to approach them with the humility they demand. Mere verbal or intellectual listening has no significance when we are confronted with immense problems. So, let us try to listen for the time being at least, not just on the verbal level or with certain conclusion at which the mind may have arrived, but with a sense of humility, so that you and I can explore together this whole problem of knowledge. The undoing of knowledge is the fundamental revolution. The undoing of knowledge is the beginning of humility. Only the mind that is humble can understand what is true and what is false, and is therefore capable of eschewing the false and pursuing that which is true. But most of us approach life with knowledge. Knowledge being what we have learned, what we have been taught, and what we have gathered in the incidents and accidents of life. This knowledge becomes our background, our conditioning, It shapes our thoughts. It makes us conform to the pattern of what has been. If we understand anything, we must approach it with humility, and it is knowledge that makes us unhumble. Have you noticed that when you know, you have ceased to examine what is? When you already know, you are not living at all. Only the mind that is undoing what it has gathered, that is actually and not merely intellectual dissipating what it has known, is capable of understanding. And for most of us, knowledge becomes the authority, the guide that keeps us within the sanctuary of society, within the frontiers of respectability. Knowledge is the center from which we judge, evaluate, from which we condemn, accept, or reject. Is it possible for the mind to free itself from knowledge? Can that self-center, which is essentially the accumulation of knowledge, be dissolved so that the mind is really humble, innocent, and therefore capable of perceiving what is truth? After all, what is it that we know? We know only facts, or what we have been taught about facts. When I examine and ask myself, what is it that I really know? I see that I actually know only what has been taught me, a technique, a profession, plus the information that I have acquired in the everyday relationship of challenge and response. Apart from that, what do I know? What we know is obviously what we have been taught or what we have gathered from books and from environmental influences, from internet, from television, from newspaper. This accumulation of what we have acquired, strengthening the background of what we call knowledge. So, can the mind, which has been put together through knowledge, undo what it has gathered and thereby remove authority altogether? It is the authority of knowledge that gives us arrogance, vanity, and there is humility only when that authority is removed, not theoretically but actually, so that we can approach this whole complex process of existence with a mind that does not know. Is it possible for the mind to free itself from that which it has known? We can see that there is great deal of tyranny in the world, and that tyranny is spreading. There is compulsion, there is misery, both physically and inwardly, and the constant threat of war. And with such a world, there must obviously be some kind of radical change in our thinking. But most of us regard action as more important than thought. We want to know what do about all these complex problems. And we are more concerned with right action than with the process of thinking that will produce right action. Now, the process of thinking obviously cannot be made new as long as one starts by thinking from any assumption, from any conclusion. So I must ask myself, as you must ask yourself, whether it is possible for the mind to undo the knowledge it has gathered. Because knowledge becomes authority, which produces arrogance, and with that arrogance and vanity, we consciously or unconsciously look at life, and therefore we never approach anything with humility. I know because I have learned, I have experienced, I have gathered, or I guide my thought and activity in terms of some ideology to which I conform. So gradually I build up this whole process of authority in myself, the authority of the experiencer, of the one who knows. And my problem is, can I, who have gathered so much knowledge, who has learned so much, who has had so many experiences, undo all that? Because there is no possibility of a radical change without the undoing of knowledge. The very undoing of knowledge is the beginning of such a change, is it not? What do you mean by change? Is change merely a movement from the knowledge I have accumulated to other fields of knowing, to new assumptions and ideologies projected from the past? This is generally what we mean by change, is it not? When I say I must change, I think in terms of changing to something I already know. When I say I must be good, I have an idea, a formulation, a concept of what it is to be good. But that is not the flowering of goodness. The flowering of goodness comes only when I understand the process and the accumulation of knowledge, and in the undoing of what I know. Then there is the possibility of a revolution, a radical change, but merely to move from the known to the known is no change at all. I hope I am making myself clear, because you and I do need to change radically, in a tremendous revolutionary way. It is an obvious fact that we cannot go on as we are. The appalling things that are taking place in the world demand an approach to all these problems from a totally different point of view, with a totally different heart and mind. That is why I must understand how to bring about in myself this radical change, and I see that I can change only when I am undoing what I have known. The The disentangling of the mind from knowledge is in itself a radical change, because the mind is humble, and that very humility brings about an action that is totally new. As long as the mind is acquiring, comparing, thinking in terms of the more, it is obviously incapable of action that is new. And can I, who am envious, acquisitive, change completely so that my mind is no longer acquiring, comparing, competing? To put it differently, can my mind empty itself, and in that very process of emptying itself, discover the action that is new? So, is it possible to bring about a fundamental change? That is not the outcome of an action of will, what is not merely the result of influence, pressure. Change based on influence, pressure on an action of will is no change at all. That is obvious if you go on to it. And if I feel the necessity of a complete radical change within myself, I must surely inquire into the process of knowledge, which forms the center from which all experience takes place. There is a center in each one of us that is the result of experience, of knowledge, of memory, and according to that center we act, we change, and the very undoing of that center, the very dissolution of that me, of that self, of that process of accumulation brings about a radical change, but that demands the hard work that is involved in self-knowledge. I must know myself as I am, not as I think I should be. I must know myself as the center from which I am acting. From which I am thinking. The center that is made up of accumulated knowledge, of assumption, of past experience, all of which are preventing an inward revolution, a radical transformation of myself. And as we have so many complexities in the world at the present time, with so many superficial changes going on, it is necessary that there should be this radical change in the individual, for it is only the individual, not the collective, that can bring about a new world. Looking at all this, is it possible for you and me as two individuals to change, not superficially but radically, so that there is the dissolution of that center from which all vanity, all sense of authority springs, that center that actively accumulates, that center that is made up of knowledge, experience, memory. This is a question that cannot be answered verbally. I put it only in order to awaken your thinking, your inquiry, so that you will start on the journey alone. Because you cannot start on this journey with the help of another. You cannot have a guru to tell you what to do or what to seek. If you are told, then you are no longer on this journey. But can you not start on this journey of inquiry alone, without the accumulation of knowledge that prevents further inquiry? In order to inquire, the mind must be free of knowledge. If there is any pressure behind the inquiry, then the inquiry is not straight, it becomes crooked. And that is why it is so essential to have a mind that is really humble, a mind that says, I do not know, I will inquire. And that there never gathers in the process of acquiring. The moment you gather, you have a center, and that center always influences your inquiry. So, can the mind inquire without accumulating, without gathering, without emphasizing the center through the authority of knowledge? And if it can, then what is the state of such a mind? What is the state of the mind that is really inquiring? Surely its state is that of emptiness.